Amen. I tell her all the time I'm going to hook up with one of those single men over there at Beulah. She said, I don't want none of that. I don't want none of that. If you have your Bibles, come with me to the book of Job and to the black family. Good to see you all, the black family. God bless you all. The book of Job, chapter 1. The book of Job, chapter 1. I've been praying for a long time as to what God would want me to share. I want you to come with me to the book of Job, chapter 1. I thank God for Bishop Christopher Hightower and the Reverend April Davenport for all they do. Thank you all. Thank you for the team that put this anniversary celebration together. Y'all had some church up in here this last couple of days. Amen. To God be the glory. Job chapter 1. And I would that you would come with me to verse 13, and I'm going to read down to verse 20. I don't normally read this many verses, but to establish the context and the content of this context, it will help me to read these verses. Job chapter 1, verse 13 through 20 reads like this. One day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell on them and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 columns, made a raid on the camels and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine, Chardonnay, Pinot Grigio, in their eldest brother's house. And suddenly a great wind came across the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose and rent his clothes, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshiped. Thank you. You may be seated. Then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, fell on the ground, and worshiped. I want to talk today from this thought very simply: worshiping while you're wounded. Worshiping while you're wounded. And if you're not too mean and bougie, will you smile at the person beside you and say, neighbor, can I keep it 100? Sometimes I'm worshiping while I'm wounded. That's the wrong neighbor. They didn't even want to talk to you. Turn to another neighbor and say, neighbor, I ain't playing. I've mastered how to worship while I'm wounded. A few years ago, my wife was at the time simply my girlfriend, and she called me after she was leaving work. She was serving as the music teacher at a local elementary school, and I could tell that the rhythm in her rhetoric and the cadence of her conversation was different on this afternoon, because she seemed to have some joviality and excitement in her voice. Normally, that's not how she talks after being around children all day long. So I knew that this day had gifted her with something special and unique. She said, I have been waiting to leave the school because I'm excited to tell you what happened today. I said, what happened today? She said, well, today I had some of the special needs children that came to my classroom. And one of my special children came in, and she said, he has autism. And when he got in the room, he kept saying, Pete the cat, Pete the cat. Pete the cat, Pete the cat, pointing at the screen in the front of the room. Pete the cat. She was trying to make out what he was saying. She said, what are you saying? He said, Pete the cat, Pete the cat. And he was pointing on the screen at the front of the room. And finally, she went over to her computer and she YouTubed Pete the cat. And a little story of a little cat, an animation of a little cat came up on the computer, and she then transferred and emitted what was on the screen of her computer on the screen of the classroom. And there's a little story about Pete the cat that the young man was wanting her to play for the class. There's a little story, if you YouTube it, I'm not making it up, there's a little story of a little character named Pete the cat who had a fresh pair of brand new white shoes. And if you were to watch this animation video, Pete the cat opens up and he's singing about his fresh white shoes. Song goes a little bit something like this: I love my white shoes. I love my white shoes. But as he's walking, he steps into some strawberries and the white shoes turn red. The narrator comes on and said, did Pete the cat get upset? They said, heavens no. He just started singing a new song. I love my red shoes. I love my red shoes. Pete the cat kept on walking and stepped into some blueberries, and the narrator came on and said, did Pete the cat get upset? The children said, heavens no. He just started singing a new song. I love my blue shoes. I love my blue shoes. Pete the cat kept on walking and he stepped into a pile of mud. The narrator came on and said, did Pete the cat get upset? The children said, heavens no. He just started singing a new song. I love my brown shoes. I love my brown shoes. Pete the cat kept on walking and he stumbled upon a puddle of water, and those brown shoes got soaked with wet water. And the narrator came on and said, did Pete the cat get upset? The children responded, heavens no. He just changed his song. I love my wet shoes. I love my wet shoes. At the end of the story, the narrator came on and shared that the moral of this story is, no matter what you step in, don't let it take your song. Listen, you will be surprised how God will sneak some revelation to you. Because as I wrapped up watching Pete the cat, my soul started getting happy. Because it is funny how so many of us allow what we step in to rob us and take our song. But Pete the cat and children have mastered the ability to understand that even when I walk through various difficulties in my life, even when I step in seasons that are not favorable, even when I walk through terrain that is not comfortable, even when I find myself in valleys of struggles and vicissitudes, or even on mountaintops of misery, I can't allow where I step to take my song. And the truth is, some of you all in this room are not in worship this morning simply because every place you've stepped has been peaceful and beautiful. Some of us in this room, only for those who can be honest and real, can admit every place I've stepped, even in the first few weeks of this year, has not felt good, has not been good, has not looked good, but I'm learning that no matter where I step, not to let it steal my song. That's the problem with some church people. You let what you're going through ruin your worship. So you sit in worship the whole time with your legs crossed, your arms folded, chewing on your chewing gum, trying to walk the long way around the sanctuary to avoid speaking to somebody who hurt you in 1999. Child, you better get out your feelings and understand worship has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm walking through, but it has everything to do with the one who's walking with me. See, that's the difference. We're not in this church because all of our bills are paid. Our hands are not lifted because we have Mercedes and 3-car garage homes. We're not up in here this morning because all of us live in Buckhead. No, we have learned that to not let where we step take our song. And that's the beauty of real worship. Worship is not even for you. Worship is for God. But at the same time, worship ain't for God. worship is for you. I said that too fast. It's not for you because it belongs to God, but it is for you because it is you that needs to take your mind off of the mess you've been in all week and put it on the God who can bring you out of the mess. See, when I get in worship, I feel like preaching. When I get in worship, I don't care what you got on. Didn't nobody come to see you. Don't you pass me no note. Don't you send me a tweet or a text. I come to enter into his gates with thanksgiving because the more I put my mind on God, I don't have space for mess no more. Who in this house can turn up on a Sunday and say, this next worship is not about where I live, not about where I drive, but it is all about the God who has blessed me with what I have right now. You ought to just get on your neighbor's nerves for a few seconds, open up your mouth and say, God, you're awesome. God, you're wonderful. God, you're great. Donald Trump is an idiot, but God, you're good, you're great, you're awesome, and as long as you're on the throne, you're still worthy. Touch somebody and say, I'm learning how to worship. Even when I get wounded. That's why I love Job. I love Job this morning because Job is trying to move your faith to a level of maturity. And if there's any church that knows about Job, it's Beulah. Because I heard through the grapevine that low-key y'all already had a trip to Job's house. A few years ago, Pastor Black put us all on the bus of his spiritual imagination. Then he had the nerve to give us the directions of how to get to Job's house. And for those of you who really listen to the sermon, you ought to remember it too. You just go due east, highway J-O-B, and you keep driving till you see an exit sign that says, us. When you turn off the exit and go right, make sure you have a handkerchief nearby. Because there's a scent coming from Job's house that will make you nauseated and make you drunk and almost want to vomit. We've already been to Job's house. But I think this morning, if you would let me, Pastor Black, I think with all going on in our world today, we need to go back to Job's house. And since we already got the directions, we're already ahead of the game. But when you get to Job's house, you're going to run into a man whose life does not line up with Old Testament scripture. He disrupts, the book of Job disrupts the rhythm and river of the Old Testament. Because before Job, there was a promise by Abraham that if we do good, good things would happen. If we treat people right, God would treat us right. If we sow good seeds, we would reap good harvest. But that doesn't happen in the book of Job. Because Job was one of the finest deacons of Uz Baptist Church. Job came to Bible study every week. Job was a faithful tither. Job was an upright man who feared God and eschewed evil. His children would go party, and just in case they might have drunk too much, he would go make sacrifices for his children. So why would God make a man like this have to deal with so many wounds? See, this brings up what theologians and biblical scholars would call the issue of theodicy. See, theodicy is when you have to wrestle with the goodness of God and the evil in the world. This ain't for everybody. Some of y'all just too super duper spiritual. This ain't for you. But some of you all in your life had to ask God, why do good things happen to bad people? And why do you let the hell raisers get all the blessings? God, if you're omnipotent, if you're omniscient, if you're omnibenevolent and you're omnipresent, why don't you stop some of the evil in the world? If you're omnipotent, that means you got all power. If you're omnibenevolent, that means you're all loving. So if you love me and you have the power to stop it, why did you let it happen? And in this world, you're going to wrestle with some questions of theodicy. When your loved one dies, when you lose your job, when you've been giving and your finances still keep going lower. I ain't talking to everybody, I'm talking to the real folks who can admit sometimes you wonder, God, like Marvin Gaye, what's really going on? But there is a theologian that I love named Gustavo Gutierrez. He wrote a book on Job. The title is On Job. And he lifts this little idea that the entire book of Job is sitting on the axle of one wager. The wager is that Satan is in the conference room with God. And God asked Satan one day, hey, where you been, boy? He said, I've just been going to and fro. God said, have you considered my servant Job? Talk about theodicy. Have you considered my servant Job? Job said, well, Satan said, well, I have, but there's a problem. You have built a fence. Church folk don't know when to shout. You got a fence so high I can't get over it. You built a fence so low I tried, but I can't get under it. You built it so wide I can't get around it. You've got Job fenced in. But here's the wager, according to Gutierrez. He says it's a wager because Satan says, hey, God, the only reason Job is faithful to you is because you've been good to him. Take some of his stuff, or I'm coming to get you, and see if he still blesses your name. Gustavo Gutierrez calls this disinterested faith. And too many people have interested faith. That simply means you're only walking with God to attain a prize or to avoid punishment. So you're really in it to see what you can get out of it. But when you walk with God for a disinterested reason, you say, God, I don't know when you're going to bless me. God, I don't know when you're going to answer my prayer. God, I don't know if my child will ever get their mind back in their head. But I tell you this, I don't serve you because of your gifts. I serve you because of who. I wish I had about 200 folks in here that can say, God, if you decide not to do another thing for me, you've already done enough. And I will walk with you just for the sake of walking with you. Who in this room has been to hell and back, and everything hadn't been good for you, but you can testify having him close to you has made a difference in your life. Don't you fool me up in Beulah today. See, some of y'all want some presence, but I just want his presence, because in his presence there's the fullness of joy. See, stuff will run out, but his spirit will always stay. I tweeted Job last night. I said, Job, Beulah's on the way back to your house. We've been there before, but we're on the way back. Because I want to figure out, how did you learn how to worship while you were still wounded? Job, you seem to have disinterested faith. But I want to know what's behind, what's the recipe, what's the remedy of how you were able to worship while you still wounded. I have a question. Do you want to know or no? Number one, Job said, I learned how to worship, number one, in spite of what I heard. I'm learning how to worship in spite of what I heard. Did you hear what he heard? In one setting, he heard 4 reports. And it's almost in the poetic nature that the report was coming in before the last report could even stop. Because it said while he was still speaking, Another report came in. The Sabians, which were nomads from Arabia, took the oxen and donkeys, killed his servants. And while he was still speaking, fire fell from heaven, burned up the sheep and the servants. And while they were still speaking, the Chaldeans, which were Neo-Babylonians from southern Mesopotamia, they came and took his camels and killed his servants. And while they were still speaking, a wind blew, knocked down the house, and killed all 10 of his children, 3 daughters, 7 sons. Did you just hear what he heard? But in spite of what he heard, then Job arose, tore his clothes, shaved his head. Many people don't understand this, but when pagans would grieve, they would cut themselves and make tattoos on their body. So even in his grief, he decided to be faithful. And the only thing faithful people do in this time period was tear their clothes and sit in ashes and shave their heads. So even in his grief, he still honored God. The Bible says after all he heard, he still had the nerve to worship. If Job could worship after all he heard, then what's wrong with some of us? With this little trivial, messy stuff you deal with, you gonna let it take your worship? This week alone, I heard a whole lot. A family with 4 children, house burned in Macon, Georgia, right around the corner from my church. They lost everything except the clothes they had on when the fire started. I heard all that. This week I went to speak at my auntie's school. While I was there speaking at my auntie's school, her heart started bothering her. Her chest tightened up. I said, "Auntie, are you all right?" She said, "It feels like an elephant is standing on my chest." We had to call the paramedics. I was there to just speak to the children, but ended up having to help my auntie. She said, "I'm having a hard time breathing." Ended up having to take her to the hospital. This week, everything I heard this week that Donald Trump, excuse me, Republicans, has banned Muslims from coming into the country, as if the only terrorists that America knows is Muslims. When the reality is there's some terrorists in this country that wear blue uniforms and badges. Muslims didn't kill Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown. It wasn't a terrorist that shot Malcolm X and Dr. King. But because of his narrow view on the world, now you're going to broad stroke a whole religion based off of your ignorance. That's what I heard. People who are citizens of America who happen to be Muslim may not be able to get back home. But after all I heard, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. And I wonder, am I the only somebody? You might have heard a whole lot this week, but can you testify even after you heard it, you didn't let it get to your heart? And you had your mind not what on just what you heard, but what on God said. You might have heard that they're passing out pink slips, but you need to compare that to what he already said. Well, what did he say, Sharpe? And my God shall supply all my needs according to his riches and glory. You might have heard that your boo is trying to leave you. Tell him, let the door hit you. Where the good Lord split you. Because you already know what he said, and no weapon formed against me shall be able to prosper. You might have heard somebody was talking about you. Well, you better remember what he said. Fret not yourself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious of workers of iniquity, because God said, I'll cut it down. Somebody open your mouth and thank God for what he already said. He said he'll keep you. He said he'll cover you. He said he'll bless you. I don't care what you heard. I know what he said. I'm learning how to worship in spite of what I heard. Then secondly, I'm learning how to worship because I'm still here. Job gets down on the ground. And this is what he starts saying. And when he worshiped, naked I came into the world. Naked I shall return. The Lord is given and he's taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. See, that's real worship, not all this cute stuff out on the radio right now. Naked I came into the world. Naked I shall return. The Lord has given, taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. This is what he said. When I got here, I didn't have Jack. When I showed up on my mama's lap, I didn't have a pamper, a diaper, Similac, Isomil, milk, Gucci, Prada, Ferragamo, Louis Vuitton, St. John. When I got here, I didn't have a Toyota, a Camry, a Lexus, a Mercedes, a house, an apartment. So really, I'm working with now what I started with. So the question is, what are you working with, Job? He said, I still got one thing. Out of everything I lost, I still got one thing. Job, what you got? He said, out of everything I lost, I still got one thing. Job, what you got? He said, I got this. I got this. I got this. As long as I still have breath in my body, I got enough to still worship about. Maybe that's why the psalmist said, let everything. Not that has a car, not that has a house, not that has a husband, but let everything that has breath touch 3 people and say, I still got my breath. I still got my breath. I've lost a lot, but I still got my breath. I've cried a lot, but I still got my breath. I've lost a lot, but I still. I dare somebody to open your mouth and let the devil see he took everything but your breath. So let the redeemed of the Lord you ought to grab your neighbor and say, neighbor, excuse me, but I'm about to show you what real worship looks like. If you want to see what a miracle is, just look at me. I've still got breath. I've still got my swag. He said, I'm going to worship in spite of what I heard. I'm going to worship because I'm still here. See, Reverend Black, can I be honest with y'all? Reverend Black used to concern me. Because when I would go hear him in revival, he would take almost 10 minutes just to give preliminary remarks. I'm not going to look at him. And I'd be sitting there saying, Reverend, I got to get back to school now and write a paper or something, but you got to. But the older I got, and the more I learned more about Reverend Black, I discovered something.
What's that?
He would take his time before he preached to literally let the people know just how blessed they were to be alive. You only appreciate being alive when you've almost been dead. Every time your pastor gets in the pulpit, you're looking at Lazarus. Somebody God got back up. So as long as he got his breath, take as long as you want, Reverend. We'll shout with you because the Lord's been good. Worship in spite of what you heard. Worship because you're still here. But lastly, worship because you got some help. I dare to touch two people and say, I got some help. Tell them I got some help. I don't care who the president is. I got some help. I don't care what my boss does. I've got some help. I don't care who walks out of my life. I've got some help. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I said, Job, it doesn't make sense to me that you said, blessed be the name of the Lord. It seems you should have just said, blessed be the Lord. He said, no, I meant what I said. And I said what I meant. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He said, because the psalmist put it this way, the Lord's name is a strong tower, and the righteous can run in, and they are safe. So if you ever need some courage, if you ever need a covering, all you got to do is think about his name. Yeah, his name in this text says Lord, but it's translated a little bit earlier than that to Jehovah. Let the church say Jehovah. But if you go back earlier than that, it's translated Yahweh. Let the church say Yahweh. He said, blessed be the name of Yahweh. So I did my homework and I said, if he said bless Yahweh's name, then I need to know what Yahweh means. And I did my research, and I discovered what Yahweh means. It means he who causes to become. You missed it. It means he that causes to become. All that means is wherever you are, God can cause it to become something else. Whatever you got, God can cause it to become something else. So when you're weak, he can cause you to become strong. When you're broke, he can cause you to be balling. When you're lonely, he can cause you to have a friend. Shake somebody's hand and say, neighbor, I got one thing that I need to tell you. God can't change your situation. So hold on. Help is on the way. Hold on. God will turn that thing all the way around. Is there anybody here that can testify? You are a witness that God can change it. You are a witness that God can fix it. You ought to slip your hands up and say, Lord, thank you for changing my situation. Say thank you for working it out. Say thank you for turning it around. Say thank you for drying my tears. Thank you for holding my hand. Thank you for rocking me to sleep. Thank you for waking me up. Thank you for letting your angels watch over me all night and all day. Now do me a favor. Put your wounded arms around your neighbor. Put your wounded spirit around your neighbor. Shake them and rock them and shake them, and say, neighbor, I'm learning how to worship while I'm wounded, and you need to keep worshiping while you're wounded, because I got a feeling after a while God will turn around. Look them in the face, look them in the eye, and say, be not dismayed, whatever betide, because God will take care of you. God will take care of you. I said God will take care of you through every day, all the way. Won't he do it? Ain't he able? Say yeah, say yeah.